Good evening. Well, it'll be morning when you see this, but this is John with Gringo.dev. Today I want to talk about how documentation, specifically technical documentation, is now dead and how ChatGPT killed it. So, the idea here is that we're going to talk through some use cases that I have found for GPT, really just things that I've come across as I use it more and more in my daily coding life. Compare it to good and bad documentation, all of that good stuff. Before I continue, two things. I'm going to talk about my perspective on AI in general and how I think it fits into the broader ecosystem, let's say, of software engineering. And also, I'd like to remind people on the channel, please like, please subscribe. I mostly do this just for helping others. And my hope is that this is useful enough to people that they would want to keep in touch with the channel and help everybody grow and learn together. So please do me a favor, click like, click subscribe, and let's go from there. But without further ado, I guess I'll just start by talking about my thoughts on AI in general and how it fits with us as humans. Broad topic, obviously, but precisely, and let's bound it. Let's say within the next 5 or 10 years, I don't think people who are top 10% engineers have that much to worry about. And I say that just because of my own observations, things with like Copilot, things with ChatGPT, all of that stuff. It just is extremely good at automating or otherwise simplifying the things that I hated the most about doing what I do. Stuff like generating a bunch of different variations of unit tests or integration tests. Stuff like synthesizing 10 different tutorials to figure out how to get exactly the behavior that I need for my app, that kind of stuff. And so it has freed my brain up to think about problems that are just much higher quality and spend my time accordingly, which has been amazing. So let's dive in a little bit more on all of that and start with the Laravel documentation because, I love Laravel. It's a great framework. I also think it's a conspicuously good example of documentation. I know it's been a priority since the start of the project. Taylor has said as much in interviews, that kind of thing. I mean, it's laid out really well. There are tutorials that you can go through. There are references, and also just by virtue of being a mature framework, pretty much every question has been asked and answered, and lots of tutorials, resources across the web. Everything exists somewhere, right? But even the official docs are like very well structured and very intelligible, in my opinion. In contrast, and I want to stress, I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but React Hook Form is an incredible library, and the maintainers deserve a lot of respect and gratitude from everybody for building something so useful. That being said, the documentation is not that good. I mean, for something so useful, it's just not presented in a very intelligible way. And so the good thing is everything is pretty much there. Like the documentation, I think, is relatively comprehensive, and there is a lot of chatter about it in Stack Overflow and other places. And so if you were to do a 2x2 matrix, and one dimension is intelligibility, let's say, and the other dimension is comprehensiveness, both of these are comprehensive, Laravel and reactive form. It's more the intelligibility, like the ability to go through and parse stuff and understand it quickly, that it kind of suffers here in the case of reactive form. But importantly, and I'll get back to this in a second, everything exists somewhere. And the reason that this is important is because ChatGPT is an amazing tool at synthesis. And that's what I'm starting to realize. And we're going to go through a bunch of cases that I've just sort of pulled aside over the last couple of weeks as I have been using these tools more and more in my own workflows to kind of illustrate a little bit more what I mean. But we're going to start here. So this is a case where I needed to upgrade my Pydantic model. So Pydantic is a library in Python for kind of like Zod in TypeScript world. It's for describing the shape of data and all of that stuff, your schema. And I wanted just a summary. Okay, what do I have to do to upgrade these models? This is actually part one. There's another part two. I don't think I did it here, where ChatGPT was not only able to tell me how to do the migration, I actually was able to feed it my Pydantic models and go from V1 to V2. Something where I just literally found myself after like 2 or 3 fields of doing this migration, I'm like, man, this is a pain in the ass. And so I just asked ChatGPT to do it because it felt like one of those problems it might be good at. And it was just able to do it for me. It was incredible. Probably saved me, I don't know, a couple hours, maybe more. And I was able to think more about strategy and things like that. Higher quality uses of my time. And similarly, like if one needed a Docker file for Flask, which I don't think we ended up using, but it was something that crossed my mind. Instead of having to do that exploration myself, I had a perfectly reasonable starting point that I was just able to pull up and run with. And it's also iterative too. So I don't have to go through a tutorial on Docker and then a tutorial on Flask, and then put the two together to get a Docker file that kind of works. I can just start with something that works, try it. If there's something else I need, I come back and I tweak it. It's amazing. Another case. So I actually have a pretty deep background in statistics, so I know the math pretty well. But it had been a while since I did anything in Python with it, and so kind of as a mix of exploration and refreshing my memory, just I knew I needed a logistic classifier for the problem that I was solving. So logistic classifiers just predict if it's 0 or 1 or true or false, and just in a very basic level. Okay, you use this library, list library. Here's how you get your samples, your sets, and go nuts, right? So something that would have taken me quite a bit of time to research. I mean, on the order of maybe an hour or something like that. Just get it and go. You know. Similarly, I had a data frame in Pandas, and I'd probably last used Pandas maybe I don't know 2 or 3 years ago. And so, yeah, rather than going through all the documentation and having to say, okay, here are all of the functions that I could use, which one kind of sounds like this problem I want to solve here, I was able to frame it this way. So I have a data frame. I have basically 5 categories in the data frame. In this case, they were priorities, 1 through 5. And I want to map them to high, medium, low. So basically, 5 categories mapped to 3. And so that seemed like a straightforward thing to do, but I didn't feel like going through the docs, which, again, another case of them being fairly comprehensive, but also maybe not the easiest to parse. And instead, just, hey, here's my specific problem. Can you just tell me how to apply pandas to this? So I think the commonality between a lot of these things is you already have some idea of what you want to do. Like I can bound the problem in some way. So I kind of understand what I want my outputs to look like, and I have some opinion about how I'd like the problem to be solved. And if those things are true, you can get a really nice direct answer. So instead of spending a bunch of time having to figure out, okay, I need to use this particular function here and structure my data in this particular way to get it to work, I have code that like pretty much works. And of course you have to try it and, correct for the 10% case where it might be slightly wrong, but it's going to get you going in the right direction, you know? Another case where, this is a weird thing. Like this was like really impressive to me because prior to this project, I had never used Alembic, which is an ORM for Python. Previously, I'd always used Django for stuff in Python world. And so we had an interesting case where we started experimenting with async and fast API and just decided later that Think and Flask was just a more appropriate fit for the stuff that we were going to work on. Neither here nor there. But the basic idea was like, look, I have this configuration that is set up for asynchronous in with Alembic and Flask, and so Alembic and Fast API rather, and I want to convert that to be synchronous with Flask. And so that's another case where it's like I have an opinion about what I want the output to be, but I just need you to give me the exact changes that I need to do. And it did a fantastic job with this. Saved me a bunch of time again, right? Again, it's like also fits kind of in that case of something that is not that interesting to do. Nobody wants to go through a configuration file and figure out exactly which magic fairy dust has to be tweaked, to to make things work. But that's why we have ChatGPT. Another case where um, I was curious about the different types of distance between vectors. And if you recall from a previous video, I was talking about LLMs and how you do computation on vectors and stuff. And I was just curious, like precisely what is the difference between these different measures, and when would one be more appropriate than the other, like that kind of stuff. And so these sort of exploratory questions, instead of having to go and again put together different sources of documentation, like sometimes it exists, sometimes it doesn't, like whatever. But like I love the fact that you get something that's very synthesized. Sometimes it even has citations, all of that stuff. And so even for just sort of I just want to understand something, it's beautiful for that use case too. Or this one where it's a pain in the butt to go through different sources, even to figure out like what is the search space. Like I need to make a technology decision. Like what ORM should I use for Python? And even that basic like, well, what is the list? Where do I start? What do I look at? Like I've used Django before. I've heard of SQL Alchemy. What else is there? And something like Kiwi, which I'd never even heard of, is actually like number 2 on the list, at least as measured by GitHub stars, right? And if you have it configured correctly with ChatGPT 4, you can go and you can do browsing, and it can pull in outside context and all of this stuff. So even research for making technical decisions becomes a lot easier with these tools too. And what you guys are going to see on this video as well is generating YouTube thumbnails. This is just kind of like a funny thing that I was curious if it could do. But now with this Dolly 3 plugin, you can generate stuff like this too. You can see here, like this prompt is not that sophisticated. The only thing that was like a little bit tricky is just getting the text to show it correctly. Just keep the short version is use all caps, make sure that it's clear where you want it placed and keep the each word like very short, like maybe 6 letters or less, and you should be pretty good. And it can generate something like this. So I think I'm going to use this one. I like it. I mean, the D might be a little bit screwy, but in any case, I'll figure it out. But yeah, so the short version is like I'm just blown away by how effective this tool is. Like I don't think you guys should feel threatened by it. I don't. I think it's a good assistant. It's doing the things that I don't want to do really well. So use it for all you can. Like free up your brain to just think about higher quality problems. That's my advice for everybody out there. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe. I am really enjoying interacting with all of you guys on the channel, and I hope that we see each other down the road. So have a great night or a great morning by the time you see this, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you.